Hi, everyone. How's your Dreamforce so far? Great, right? Hi, I'm Violet Gong. I'm a senior engineer manager at Lightning Platform in Salesforce. Today, I'm going to tell you why you should use 3 amazing Lightning technologies to build your Lightning app. First, hope it works. Your favorite slide, the safe harbor. So we're a public traded company. Please make any purchase decisions based on what we currently have now. The 3 amazing Lightning technologies I'm going to talk about today are Lightning App Builder, Lightning Data Service, and Lightning Design System. So before I start, I'd like to know how much do you guys know about these technologies? How many of you have been to Lightning App Builder sessions? Great. How about Lightning Data Service? No? Nice. What about Lightning Design System? Great. So it looks like some of you are already been to this session separately. So in this session, I'm going to put all 3 of these technologies together and show you how my team in Salesforce built Record Home with these 3 amazing Lightning technologies. So for those of you who don't know what a Record Home is, it is a representation of Salesforce Record. It can be account, an opportunity, or any customer object. Usually, customers can view, edit, and create and delete records from a Record Home. It usually contains 2 main parts. The first one is Highlights panel, which renders records based on the compact layouts defined by the system admin. It also has a Detail panel, which renders the record based on the full layout defined by admin. As you can see, Record Home is on different form factors as well, including mobile, desktop, and tablet. So on the left is the Record Home, the first Record Home we built for Salesforce 1 during Winter 15th release. And on the right is the Record Home today on both Lightning Experience and Salesforce 1. Through these releases, we've made 3 major improvements for Record Home. In Winter 15th release, Record Home is not customizable, meaning that customers cannot swap the components for Record Home. They can change the Highlights component to something that's more relevant to their use case. They can add a new tab to the body. But today, customers can easily customize Record Home. As you can see here, on the top is a Record Home, Opportunity Record Home. It has a Highlights panel on the top and a Sales Pass in the middle. And at the bottom is an Account Record Home. I've customized the Account Record Home to get rid of the highlights on the top and moved it to the right side and rendering vertically. So in the Winter 15th release, there's no shared data loading and caching mechanism for Record Home. What does that mean? That means even highlights and detail, they're rendering the same data. They each need to go out to the server to load the data. However, today, we have a shared data loading and cache mechanism. So no matter how many components on the Record Home need to access the opportunity record or account record, it all delegates to this new shared data loading and caching to load record for them. Also, in Winter 15th release, everything is based on the red line. The UI and UX is based on the red line. So developers need to write hundreds of CSS codes to match the right lines to make sure the app looks good. Today, we know the developers no longer need to worry about CSS code. They can literally build the app with a nice look and feel without 0 lines of CSS code. It really frees them up, and they can focus 100% on functionality, algorithm, and performance of the component. Now I'm going to walk you through one by one of how we did all these amazing things. First, I'm going to talk about the Lightning App Builder. This is a simplified version of how the Record Home looks like in a Winter 15th release. It's a standalone recordhome.cmp. And inside that, It has a hard-coded highlights component and also an async carousel component. The async carousel component contains chatter, detail, and the related tab. With this tightly coupled component, it is very hard for anyone to customize Record Home. You can't just inject a random component to swap the highlights component for it. So how do we solve this issue? We bring up a whole new metadata called Lightning Page. Record Home is no longer a standalone component, but a Lightning Page. It's a set of metadata, the content of the page, the layout of the page, composition of the page, they are metadata. So every Lightning Page is backed by a template, which contains a couple of regions. So for a default Record Home template, it contains these 4 regions: the header region on top, subheader in the middle, body on the left, and sidebar on the right. Regions are basic containers that allows customers and us to put components inside it. So for Opportunity Record Home, we put a highlights component in the header region, and the sales pass component in the sidebar in the subheader region. A tab set component in the body region with 3 tabs: activity, collaborate, and details. We also have a related list on the sidebar region. So this is how Record Home looks like now today, living production for Lightning experience. Internally, we also call Lightning Page Flexi Page. That's why you can see the Opportunity Record is no longer a recordhome.cmp. It's a .flexi page. A flexi page is an XML file that you can specify a template for the page, as well as define the content in the regions. So you're going to say, I don't want to sit there and write this boring XML file. So no worries. We built a visual tool around this new metadata to allow customers customize Record Home simply by drag and drop. So I'm going to show you a quick demo of how you can customize Opportunity Record Home with Lightning App Builder. Here you can see I have an Opportunity Record Home. In order to customize this page, you just go to the Setup gear and click Edit Page here. So for the purpose of the demo, I've already made some change to the Record Home. Instead of using the default highlights and detail components, I replaced it with my detail and my highlights component so we can move forward with the demo. But as you can see, the detail tab is not the default tab of the Opportunity Record Home. I would like my sales reps to see detail tab as soon as they get into an Opportunity Record Home. I can do that by simply change the default tab from activity to details. I also noticed that this Record Home is missing a sales pass component. Sales pass is a really powerful component for sales reps to improve their productivity. So I just dragged and dropped the sales pass component to my Opportunity page. I'm going to click Save and go back. Now you can see the detail is the default tab, and I have the sales pass in the middle of the page. I did this with 0 lines of code, no Visualforce, no Apex, just drag and drop. I think that's the magic of Lightning App Builder. There are actually 3 types of Lightning page that you can customize. Record Home is one of them. You can also customize Homepage, which is the landing page of Lightning experience. You can also customize the App page, which is the page/app that you can put in your navigation bar. I'm not going to go through the rest of the 2 pages today, but you can find more details in the Trailhead modules. So we just talked about Lightning App Builder. The next Lightning technology that I want to talk about is Lightning Data Service. So as I mentioned before we had Lightning Data Service, each component needs to go out and load data for itself. If you look at here, we have highlights component and detail component. They're rendering the exactly same record, but just with different fields. However, each of them has a client-side controller that fires the server action to an Apex server-side controller, which generates the SQL and load data from Salesforce. So what's the issue with this data loading flow? First, it's inefficient. As you can see, for the component controller, which is the JavaScript controller, both the detail and highlights, they look very similar. They're almost exactly the same. And even on the Apex controller side, they look very similar as well, other than they have different fields. Second, it's not performant. Imagine you have a couple of components on the record home that all needs to access this record. Each of them needs to go have a server trip, which increase the load on the server side. Also, I mentioned that you can also edit or create delete records on record home. Let's take a look at the data saving flow without Lightning Data Service. Assuming that my detail panel just edit the record. So after it successfully edit the record and update from server, it fires a force refresh view event. This is an application event to tell the app that, OK, I just updated myself. You guys need to go update you too, so that we can keep the data consistent. My highlights component is listening to that force refresh view event. And how it handles the event, it go back to the server and reload the records and re-render itself to make sure the data looks consistent on the page. Again, it caused a problem. If I have multiple components on the page that needs to handle this refresh view events, it's going to cause a couple of server trips just to reload the same data. So we solved this by introducing the Lightning Data Service. One of the most important features of Lightning Data Service is the new component called Force Record Preview. What does this record preview do? It automatically loads the record for you. So what does that mean? It takes a couple of attributes. It takes a record ID, a target record, and a set of fields, or maybe a layout type. So you can specify whether it's a compact layout or a full layout. It also has this shared record cache on the client side. So this cache is a local storage that holds one single copy of that record. So when you request the Force Record Preview to fetch a record for you, it first checks the cache. If it already has a copy in the cache, it returns directly without even going to the server. But if it's not there, it's smart enough to consolidate the request. So even I have force highlights and force detail, it becomes one request and go to the server. It will automatically generate the SQL for you and load data from Salesforce. Record Preview also provides a CRUD functionality for you. You can do an update, a delete, or create record with Record Preview methods. It also has this very fancy auto notification system. Remember I said before, you have to fire force refresh view events to tell others that your record has been updated. If you're using Record Preview, this will handle it for you automatically. So if your component is using Force Record Preview, it doesn't need to handle any force refresh view events. It will automatically know that, OK, the record has been updated. I need to reload it from the cache and re-render it by myself. So let's take a look at how we can refactor our detail and highlights components to leverage these cool features of Lightning Data Service. So here is my opportunity record home. And these are my components. Like I said, I have a highlights component that has a Apex controller, goes back to the server to execute the SQL and load data. It also, when we first initialized my highlights component, it needs to call that doInit and start to load data. And when a refresh view event is handled, it also needs to go to the server and load the data. So let's start to use the Lightning Data Service. I'm going to replace the data loading logic from here. to use Force Record Preview. It takes the record ID, target record, and the set of fields, which is on the compact layout. Also, as I mentioned, that because you're using record preview, you no longer need to handle the refresh view by yourself. It will automatically do it for you. So I'm going to get rid of this line as well. Now, if I look at my controller, the loading record is the only part for the JavaScript controller. So I don't need it anymore. I can go ahead and just delete it. Since I've already deleted this JavaScript side controller, I also no longer need the server-side controller, which basically generate the SOQL and load data for me. I'm going to delete this as well. Oops. So I need to get rid of the controller first. And delete it. Cool. Let's take a look at my detail component. So it's very similar to my highlights. It also has this init method to load the data for you, also the refresh view method to reload the data for you through this server-side controller. So I'm going to use Force Record Preview as well. So here I'm using two Force Record Preview, one to load the record in edit version, and the other is in view version, view mode. Also, I don't need to refresh view anymore. Now, if I look at my JavaScript controller, I know that I can get rid of this doInit method function to load data. I can also get rid of here in the Apex controller as well. As I mentioned before, you can also say update a record through record preview. So what does that mean is that instead of using a server-side action to call save records and go to the Apex controller, you can use the method on record preview. So you can see now we are calling the edit record save record. The callback is pretty much the same. It fires the toast event to tell users that the record has been updated successfully. Since the record preview handles save for me, I no longer need the save record from my Apex controller either. So it looks like I can just get rid of this controller. How about now? The code looks much cleaner now, and we've deleted a couple of controllers already. So let's take a quick look at the before and after. So before we have Lightning Data Service, we have a JavaScript controller and Apex controller for highlights components. After it, we replace the data loading logic with Force Record Preview, and we no longer need the JavaScript controller or the server-side controller. For detail panel, we also have two controllers at the beginning. And after replacing it, loading logic with record preview, and also we updated the save record logic with a method on record preview, we no longer need the Apex controller as well. So here's a quick summary of the benefits of using record preview. First, no more Apex or SOQL codes. You don't need to worry about the data loading logic by yourself anymore. It all takes care for you. Second is the performance boost from that highly efficient client-side cache. And third is that because of that auto notification system, you no longer need to handle the forced refresh view and reload the data from server. So this whole thing really saved a lot of the burdens from server side. That's really awesome. So that's the Lightning Data Service we used on Record Home. Last, I'm going to talk about the Lightning Design System. So before I tell you how awesome the Lightning Design System is, I want to tell you the lessons we learned when we first built Salesforce One Mobile. We're mainly using the red lines to communicate between designers and developers for the look and feel of the components. So what are the problems with red lines? First, engineers need to follow those red lines and write hundreds of CSS code just to make the component look right. I am an original developer for Salesforce 1. I can tell you that I don't like to red lines. It's not searchable, it's not filterable. It takes a while for me to find some specs for components through all these giant PNG or PDF files. So because of it's a static PDF or PNG file, it's very hard to maintain. When we start to adding more and more functionalities to the app and designers come and go, nobody is there to maintain those red lines. So we start to see a lot of the inconsistency in the app across components and between teams. Also, because of static resource limitation, it's very hard to keep up with the rapid design change. For example, if the designer wants to update a small padding or a border, is he going to update the whole red line and send to you? So it's very hard. Sometimes we just skip that step, so the red line becomes obsolete very quickly. Last but not least, since these red lines are not exposed to the customers, so customers need to reverse engineer our styles to make their components look like a Lightning component. So with all these issues, our design team come up with this game-changing Lightning design system. It's mainly a living style guide. It has the design guidelines that has the best practice design principles for our core visual components and interactions. It's also a CSS framework. You can not only use it for Lightning, but you can also use it for Visualforce or even outside Salesforce with other technology stacks. Also, it has a bunch of resources. It has icons, fonts, tokens, etc. Now let's take a look at how the highlights look like in Lightning design system. Here is the page header, aka the highlights in Lightning design system. You can see that it looks very similar to this highlights component. It has a very detailed sample code here. It also has a vertical version that just I showed for the account record home. I can move it from top to the right. Now let's take a guess. In order to achieve this style, how many lines of CSS code do you need to write? How much lines did I write for my highlights.cmp? Take a guess. 50? 100? Or 200? So let's take a look. Here's my highlights component. And I have 0 CSS lines. 0 CSS to achieve that sleek look and feel like a native sales app. What about detail? In detail, it's more complicated, right? It has more fields and also has this pencil icon that you hover, it changes the color. How many lines of CSS code do you think I need for detail? It has 0 lines of CSS code as well. So all these look and feel, all these styles, I can build with 0 CSS. So this is a really powerful tool. It really frees up the developer cycle. So they no longer need to worry about the pixel perfection or the red line change. They can focus their energy 100% to the functionality of the components. So you might say, this is just a demo component, right? What about in real life? Is it really that we don't need any CSS code for Record Home, for Highlights panel? Let's take a look. So here is the real production code of Highlights. As you can see that we went from 129 lines of CSS code to 4 lines of CSS code just by applying Lightning design system to our components. So now we've already covered all 3 Lightning technologies that we use to build our record home. First, to recap, first is the Lightning App Builder. It allows you to customize Record Home simply by drag and drop because it has Lightning page metadata back it. You can not only customize Record Home, but also the home page and app page. Second is the Lightning Data Service. It dramatically simplified the record accessing logic. You no longer need to write any Apex or SQL controllers or queries to load your record. You can simply use the Force Record Preview component. It also gives you that performance boost due to its highly efficient client-side cache. Last, we talked about Lightning Design System. It's a living style guide. It keeps your app has a consistent look and feel. And it really frees up the developers from the CSS code. Developers no longer need to write any of them to make the component look nice. They can dedicate 100% to the algorithm, to performance, to functionalities of the component. So Record Home is an internal team. So we build features on Lightning Experience. But we are also our own customers. We consume all these technologies on Lightning. And that's why you should start to use these three technologies as well. So Lightning is not just a product, it's a platform. It really empowers our customers to build the apps exactly the same way as we build it. I think that's the true power of Lightning platform. So here are some of the resources that you can follow up offline. Most of them are from Trailhead. So Trailhead is really your best friend to get familiar with all these technologies. That's it. Thank you, everyone.